China used the weapon the world fears to attack the U.S. fleet. 4:20 a.m., August 30th, 2025. China launched its deadliest attack. 20 DF-21D ballistic missiles and 36 cruise missiles aimed at the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group, a $30 billion fortress at sea with 4,000 American sailors on board. But the American shield held firm. 55 of the 56 missiles were destroyed in mid-air. Only one warhead exploded near the Ford's hull, shaking the bulkheads but not crippling the ship. The carrier killer missed its target. Then came the counterattack. 30 Tomahawk missiles, 12 stealth fighters, and 2 B-2 bombers turned Hainan and Guangdong into firestorms. By dawn, 70% of China's missile force had been destroyed. What happened to the sailors who endured that terrible moment? And what did the American counterattack destroy in China? Let me find out. August 30th, 2025. 140 nautical miles southwest of Mischief Reef, Spratly Islands, South China Sea. The USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group was moving at 28 knots through international waters, a formation worth nearly $30 billion in combined naval power. Its mission was routine patrol, at least on paper. In reality, it was a calculated show of force to reassure allies after months of escalating Chinese maritime aggression. At exactly 4:21 a.m., the night sky tore open. From deep inside Guangdong province, 20 DF-21D carrier killer ballistic missiles erupted from hidden launch silos. Each missile carried a 1,300-pound warhead and traveled at Mach 10, fast enough to cross 900 miles in under 11 minutes. Beijing's decision was not a warning shot. It was a declaration of intent. The first wave was followed almost immediately by 15 H-6K bombers flying from Lingshui Air Base on Hainan Island. They carried 36 CJ-10 land attack cruise missiles, each with a range of 930 miles and programmed to strike the American task force from multiple vectors. Overhead, 12 J-20 stealth fighters soared into escort positions, ready to intercept any U.S. counterstrike. The numbers alone were staggering. In less than 5 minutes, China had committed over $2 billion worth of advanced weaponry in a single strike package. Beijing believed the element of surprise, combined with saturation firepower, would overwhelm even the most advanced U.S. defenses. But the real shock was not just the scale, but the risk. By launching missiles from the mainland and Hainan Island, China crossed a line that no adversary had dared to cross in decades. The attack put more than 4,000 American sailors at risk. The launches were immediately recorded by Pentagon satellites, and sirens blared across the decks of every American warship. Some off-duty sailors were jolted awake by the alarm, but within 3 seconds they had regained their composure and were back in their positions as their radar screens lit up with dozens of incoming targets. Before we get to how the sailors reacted, tell me what you would do if you were a member of the ship? The incoming barrage closed the distance in less than 8 minutes. On the radar displays of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the screen bled with red markers, dozens of ballistic and cruise missiles converging from multiple directions. For any other Navy, this would have been the moment of annihilation. But the United States Navy carried with it the most sophisticated defensive shield on Earth. Within seconds, the strike group's escorts sprang into action. 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, USS John Finn and USS Halsey, activated their Aegis combat systems, each capable of tracking over 300 targets simultaneously. The order came: engage all inbound. From the destroyer's vertical launch cells, 40 SM-6 interceptors roared skyward at blistering speed, over Mach 3.5. In coordinated salvos, they tore into the stratosphere, meeting the DF-21D ballistic missiles head-on. Explosions flashed like miniature suns across the night sky. In just 90 seconds, 14 of the 20 carrier killers were obliterated mid-flight. As the survivors descended, the next layer of defense engaged. Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, ESSMs, streaked upward from frigates and cruisers, slamming into another 4 warheads. The last 2 DF-21Ds broke through, screaming toward the carrier. One missile was forced off course by electronic jamming, plunging harmlessly into the sea. The other detonated less than 300 yards from the Ford's port side, unleashing a fireball that rocked the 100,000-ton vessel. Bulkheads rattled, lights flickered, and sailors were thrown from their feet. but the carrier's armored hull held firm. Damage, minimal. Meanwhile, the CJ-10 cruise missiles met their fate. Low-flying at treetop level, they sought to evade radar, but the MQ-25 Stingray drones relayed real-time targeting data. Phalanx CIWS cannons, rotating 6-barrel Gatlings spitting 4,500 rounds per minute, turned the air into a wall of tungsten. In less than 4 minutes, 33 of the 36 cruise missiles were shredded to pieces, their flaming wreckage raining into the sea. The remaining 3 were picked off by last-ditch RYM-116 interceptors. When the smoke cleared, the numbers were staggering. Out of a combined strike of 56 inbound missiles, 55 had been destroyed or neutralized. Only a single warhead had managed to detonate close enough to shake the Gerald R. Ford. The U.S. strike group had absorbed what Beijing considered its knockout punch and survived with barely a scratch. If this breakdown helps you understand the reality of modern warfare, show your support by liking and subscribing right now. The skies still glowed with the embers of intercepted missiles when the order came from the Combat Information Center aboard USS Gerald R. Ford. Execute Operation Iron Thunder. The Chinese strike had failed to cripple the fleet. Now it was America's turn. The plan was ruthlessly precise. At 5:10 a.m., 2 Virginia-class submarines lurking in the depths, USS Illinois and USS Missouri, opened their hatches. From beneath the South China Sea, they unleashed a storm of 30 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles, each carrying a 1,000-pound high-explosive warhead. Their targets: Chinese radar stations on Hainan Island, hardened hangars at Lingshui Air Base, and command and control bunkers coordinating the missile barrage from Guangdong. Simultaneously, the flight deck of the Gerald R. Ford erupted with activity. 5 F-35C, Lightning IIs, and 7 FA-18E Super Hornets catapulted into the dawn sky, armed with a combined payload of 40 precision-guided bombs and 28 AM-120 AMRAAMs. Their mission: neutralize the H-6K bombers still circling near Hainan and suppress air defenses before the Tomahawks arrived. The opening salvos were devastating. Within minutes, 2 radar domes were incinerated, their billion-dollar electronics reduced to twisted steel. The F-35s, using their stealth to perfection, slipped past J-20 patrols and obliterated a runway at Lingshui with GBU-31 JDAMS grounding half of the bomber fleet. American firepower was carving open a hole in China's southern shield, but then, the unexpected. At 5:34 a.m., a critical fault hit the USS Missouri. One Tomahawk launch system froze mid-sequence, leaving 12 missiles trapped inside their vertical cells. For a chilling moment, the entire counterstrike risked collapse. Without the second wave of missiles, Chinese HQ bunkers would remain intact, and the J-20S could regroup to cut down the American strike package. For 2 agonizing minutes, engineers worked frantically below deck. Sparks flew as technicians manually overrode the failsafe. At the edge of disaster, the system rebooted. A shudder ran through the submarine as the trapped missiles finally roared free, tearing through the ocean surface like spears of fire. The entire strike plan snapped back into motion. The effect was catastrophic for Beijing. By 6 a.m., 4 Chinese radar stations were offline, 1 airbase was burning, and at least 18 aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Hainan's southern coast was lit by secondary explosions as fuel depots ignited, sending plumes of smoke 20,000 feet into the air. The most decisive moment of this battle is still to come. Stay with us as we reveal it next. By dawn, a retaliatory strike was being prepared by China. If not suppressed in time, the next attack could destroy the already damaged U.S. defense system. Washington's response was immediate. Send in the ghosts. At 7:15 a.m., 2 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers lifted off from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, each carrying a deadly arsenal of 8 GBU-57 AB massive ordnance penetrators, 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs capable of burrowing through 200 feet of reinforced concrete. Their mission: erase China's underground missile silos before a second strike could be launched. The flight was silent, the Spirits invisible to radar as they sliced across the Philippine Sea at 50,000 feet altitude. Hours of planning condensed into seconds of execution as they reached their release point above Guangdong's missile fields. At 7:54 a.m., bomb bay doors opened. 16 bunker busters fell like thunderbolts, their GPS guidance zeroing in on silo complexes buried beneath mountainsides. The results were apocalyptic. The first bomb detonated beneath hardened earth, igniting fuel storage caverns and setting off a chain of underground explosions. Shockwaves rippled outward, collapsing entire tunnel networks. One by one, the silos vanished into craters over 300 feet wide. Chinese crews barely had time to sound alarms before their positions disintegrated. In less than 10 minutes, 70% of China's southern anti-ship ballistic missile force was annihilated. Meanwhile, the U.S. Carrier Strike Group pressed the assault. F/A 18 Super Hornets strafed coastal SAM batteries with precision-guided rockets, while Arleigh Burke destroyers launched another 24 Tomahawks to finish off surviving radar sites. The once formidable coastal shield of Hainan Island was reduced to burning wreckage, its command posts silenced, its airfields cratered beyond use. The scale of devastation stunned even hardened Pentagon analysts. Beijing had gambled everything on its carrier killer arsenal, and lost it in a single morning. What began as an attempt to drive U.S. forces away had instead shattered China's credibility and crippled its strategic deterrent. The decisive blow had been struck. Yet everyone aboard the Gerald R. Ford knew this was not victory. It was humiliation for Beijing, and humiliation on such a scale demanded a response. By mid-morning on August 30th, 2025, silence fell over the South China Sea. The roars of engines, the thunder of interceptors, and the firestorms of detonations faded into an eerie calm. What remained was a battlefield littered with wreckage, and a message that could not be ignored. China's opening gamble had cost it dearly. In just 5 hours of combat, Beijing had lost 4 radar stations, 1 major airbase, 18 aircraft, and nearly 70% of its DF-21D arsenal. Billions of dollars in hardened infrastructure were reduced to blackened craters. Worst of all, the weapon it had proudly labeled a carrier killer had failed to sink so much as a single U.S. vessel. The USS Gerald R. Ford emerged from the inferno with only superficial scars. A shaken crew, rattled bulkheads, and minor damage to 1 escort ship. Not a single American warship was lost. For the 4,000 sailors aboard, survival was not just luck. It was proof that the U.S. Navy's layered defenses remained unmatched. In Beijing, the mood was grim. The Politburo had expected a swift, surgical humiliation of the U.S. Instead, they watched as America's counterstrike tore through their southern shield in a matter of hours. Propaganda could mask some truths, but the reality was undeniable. Their most advanced missiles had been hunted down, their air bases gutted, their strategy broken. Internationally, the fallout was immediate. Tokyo, Manila, and Canberra announced they would grant U.S. forces expanded access to their ports and airfields. NATO issued a rare statement of full solidarity in the Pacific. Even neutral states voiced alarm at China's recklessness. Beijing had hoped to intimidate. Instead, it had isolated itself further. The regret was not just military. It was strategic, political, and moral. What was meant to be a show of dominance had become a self-inflicted wound, a warning etched in fire across the South China Sea. America had answered the challenge, and the cost for China was humiliation on a global scale. The lesson was clear. In the crucible of modern war, boldness without calculation leads not to glory, but to ruin. The Battle of August 30th, 2025, will be remembered as a turning point in modern naval warfare. What began in the darkness before dawn, with 20 ballistic missiles and 36 cruise missiles screaming toward a single U.S. carrier strike group, ended in daylight with China's arsenal shattered and its strategy exposed. The United States Navy demonstrated not only unmatched resilience, but also the ability to strike back with overwhelming precision. Out of 56 missiles launched in the opening salvo, 55 were destroyed in the air. Out of 24 bombers and fighters sent to press the attack, many never returned home. And when the counterstrike came, it was swift, coordinated, and devastating. 30 Tomahawks, 16 bunker-busting bombs, and dozens of precision airstrikes erased years of Chinese military buildup in a matter of hours. For Beijing, the cost was staggering. Billions of dollars in destroyed infrastructure, dozens of aircraft lost, and the credibility of its much-hyped carrier killer reduced to ash. For Washington, the message was equally clear. American carriers could still sail into contested waters and survive, shielded by the most advanced layered defenses on Earth. But beyond the statistics and the wreckage, this battle delivered a deeper truth. In war, perception is as powerful as firepower. China sought to intimidate and humiliate. Instead, it broadcast its weakness to the world. Allies rallied closer to Washington, while Beijing was left grappling with isolation, regret, and the heavy burden of miscalculation. The South China Sea, once a theater of threats and brinkmanship, had spoken in fire, and the verdict was undeniable. Striking first may light the fuse of conflict, but only those prepared to endure and retaliate will shape the final outcome. If you enjoy detailed analysis and strategic perspectives like this, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell to stay updated on every development in these conflicts.